Okay, now it's time for something a little more fun. You're going to have to get out one of your stepper motors. So they're all the same in this kit, which is good. And then carefully unkink the cable, because wrapped up isn't going to do anyone any good. Wires like to be kind of straightish, so just carefully unwind them. Get them out to where they belong. Be careful not to pull on the connector end or on the stepper motor end. Get the cable under control. Now you'll notice these stepper motors have a key on one side. So on the round shaft there's a flat side, and that's what we're going to tie the screw into. If you rotate the motor, you'll feel little tiny clicks inside. Each of these clicks is 1.8 degrees. And the motor uses these clicks to know exactly how far it's turned. For our first stepper motor, we need to take one of the toothed pulleys and put it onto the stepper motor with the little grub screws at the top side. Now, it's important to make sure one of these grub screws lands on this keyed surface, because once you do a grub screw up on that surface, the gear has no way of rotating without the motor. So you'll probably have to loosen both of these off using your smallest Allen key provided before it will go on. Once it slides on neatly, you need to just tighten the one on the flat side until it's just creating friction. Now, the height you have to set for this stepper motor is 2 millimeters from the tip, which is pretty hard to measure. Luckily, one of these M3 nuts is exactly 2 millimeters, so if you sit one of them on top, you quite easily set the height perfectly. If you've got a friend, it's probably a good time to get their assistance. And exactly one nut high. I'll check it with a ruler for you. Makes it exactly 2 millimeters from the end. Now this is where you're going to have to rely on the super glue as a Loctite. So you've got two grub screws here. Make sure they're both done up slightly. And you can then remove one completely. Leave it on the end of your Allen key. Collect your super glue and your safety bag. If you've never used super glue, to open it you take the end off completely, and on the tip of the cap there's a little piercer. Be careful not to squeeze the tube as you pierce it, otherwise you'll get glued. If you do get glued, you just need some acetone. Once it's done, flip the lid over, screw it on, and you've got super glue. Ever so carefully squeeze the tube slowly. You can even see the liquid coming down the nozzle, and put the smallest drop you can possibly manage onto that grub screw. With that tiny drop on there, we'll insert it back into this pulley. Wind it down until it touches the bottom, then give it a good tight turn. You won't get a quarter turn out of these, you'll only get a slight bit because they're pressing into metal. And once one's done, remove the second grub screw and repeat. So leave it on the end of your Allen key, the tiniest drop of glue you can muster, then carefully wind it back into the pulley. Turn it till it's tight. Again, you don't have to use the Allen key long ways, only the short side at the top. You don't need any more force than that. Put the lid back on your super glue and return it and its safety barrier out of the way. Job done. Now it's time to move on to creating the XY slider. Have a look at this wooden plate here with a lot of the long straight pieces. You'll see there's these top three pieces here. XY top back is what's written on all of them, and these three pieces are the ones we're going to need for the next project. So go ahead, grab your Stanley knife and get these three pieces off from away from the others. Now for this next step, you're going to need these three. You're going to need your stepper motor with toothed gear, that's 2mm from the end, as set by you. And you're going to need to go through the parts. You're going to have to find one of your bags of zip ties, doesn't matter which packet. So get them, open them up. And put your zip tie collection into your tools box, mainly because your parts box is starting to get full. Bag can go away. And you're going to need the 24-inch end stop. So in Australia that's about 600mm, and it's pretty easy because there's either 24 inches or there's a really short 6-inch one. So it's easy to tell. We want the long one. Once you've got that out of the packet, put all the other wiring pieces back in their bag and put them back away in your large box. There's one piece missing. We need the Acme rod screw. So that's this little plastic guy here. This one's going to use the threaded rod to control your Z-axis up and down vertically. To screw all of this together, we're going to need 2 M2 by 10mm screws for the end stop. These guys are really skinny and really small, so just use your sheet to make sure you've got them and put them safe. You're going to need 4 of your standard M3 by 16 screws with nuts. So make sure you get 4 of them together. And you're going to need 6 M3 by 10mm screws. So these are the same width as the M3 by 16s, just a bit shorter. You need 6 of them, 4 for this big fat stepper motor and 2 for this Darylin Acme thread plug. Do you mind, Bobby? And this is SpongeBob, he's helping today, yeah? Good boy. Alright, he's not very helpful, but we'll see how we go. So, grab this triangle-y piece and the square piece, and then with text outwards, we're going to have to connect them together like this. So, you'll have the circular hole at the front here, and the chamfer to the back. The text is on the outside of both. Then grab an M3 by 16 bolt and nut, and put them together the same way we put just about everything together. Wind it in, and quarter turn at the end just to secure everything. Next step is to put this Darylin thread hole plug in. So it goes in this hole here, and the 2 holes in it line up with the 2 holes underneath. Now we're going to use M3 by 10 screws here, and they're going to cut their own thread into the wood, so they're going to be a little stiffer to put in than the others. The only important thing to do when you're doing these guys is keep this plug as flat and level as you can. So hold it in with your thumb while you drive these in so that it doesn't twist and go off center. Again, tighten these up just a quarter turn past tight when they hit the bottom. Just make sure everything's all nice and tight and we don't strip any wood. Okay, that's looking good. Next step is to put this end stop in. So start with the tail. put the tail through the hole and carefully drag it all the way through. Now this end stop, when it's installed, you need the bottom edge pointing downwards. So text is upright and the bottom edge, so the furthest away piece is just down here. And then carefully bend the wires and line it up with the holes. And then you're going to need to use a couple of the M2x10 bolts. They're really skinny guys. And for these you're going to have to use your smallest Allen key. They're a little painful to get lined up. But once they're lined up, off they go. Get them both started first before you drive them all the way in. Make sure the wires are fine through the hole, and then we'll drive them down. So just look at the end stop and watch them pull it in. And just go till they feel tight. You don't need to be a hero, especially because these are going into a soft plastic end stop. We need to be careful that we don't break it. Job done. It's looking pretty fancy. Keep tools in the tray. Then the next step is put this aside and get the YZ plate out. So this guy is going to need 8 of your linear bearings, which are these big long metal slug type guys. So go ahead and use the knife to pull these out of their packets. The only thing we do need to do with these bearings is we need to oil them, because they never come with enough oil. So just put a few drops down each side and roll it around. Make sure there's plenty of oil in there. Even if a little bit of oil leaks out of these, it's much better to have extra oil than not enough. These are going to be held in by zip ties, so we'll start with the top, one of these top two. So with YZ top written there, we want to put these two in the back. And they're only just going to squeeze in there, so you may have to put them in on an angle like this and make sure they're touching perfectly as they push in, so they both end up level. Because if they're not both perfectly flat, you're going to have unending dramas. Grab 4 zip ties for this. Carefully flip them over, holding the bearings in. And from the bottom side, push the zip ties into the bottom. Being careful that the textured side is facing up. Bring them around, over the bearings, back up. Now this is the important bit. These black bits need to end up over here. So thread them through, get them most of the way done up, but not tight. Do that for all of them. Get them almost done up. Now position them so that this black piece is right at the top, and using your thumb to hold the black piece down at the top, carefully pull the zip tie through till they're tight. Go along and do all 4. Then there, check the backs, make sure they're all perfectly straight. And these are almost tight enough. You see how I can just press in with my thumb there? It means they're not quite as tight as we'd like. So grab your pliers, get hold of the zip tie, and just pull, carefully rock the pliers back and upwards. So this motion, grab it and roll backwards, this motion will pull the zip tie through and get you an extra little bit. Now you'll see when I push on these, they're much tighter. So with those 2 done, we can get the outer 2 out the way. If you don't have side cutters, scissors will work just as well. And then you can get to the inner 2 and do the same thing. Grab them and just roll backwards so they get that little bit tighter. And we have to do the exact opposite. So 2 bearings. Let's sit on the bottom side again. Make sure they fit nice and snugly so they're both perfectly level together. And then we grab 4 more zip ties, and again, so that we end up with the zipping mechanism towards the top, we push them in here. 2, 3, number 4. So now, if you put this up the right way, we should have 4 lumps at the very top, 4 lumps at the bottom, and 4 bearings on the back. Now it's time to put in the last 4 bearings. So these guys actually go on the top side this time. So we'll do this side first, because this side's fairly easy. All of these zip ties have to end with the buckle facing the inner edge. So what we'll do with these guys is we'll send them all in this way. Round the back up. Make sure both bearings are in there at all times, otherwise one might get out the way and cause you grief. So if they're not both in there, don't do anything up, because you might end up having to cut them off and start again. So we'll try to do them together as a pair. And you see that one didn't go through the holes, so I'm going to have to fix that up. Luckily I've got enough zip tie left I can keep going, but if you do make a mistake, just don't feel bad, just cut the zip tie off and start again. There's always more zip ties in the world. With these all getting tight, we need to hand tighten them and push these right down to this side out the way. So do that as best as you can. bearings left to go. They go on the same side as those last two. They fit nice and easy on this side. But this is a slightly tricky one. We've got zip ties going everywhere. So we're going to have 3 that end this way. So the lower 3. 1, 2, and 3. So we'll do these guys first, then we'll come back for that last one. Before we tighten these 3, we've got to add the last zip tie. But this zip tie actually goes in the opposite direction. So it comes in this side. And if you don't put it in this way, then you're going to have clearance issues. And you might get jammed later on. So be very careful with this guy. He has to go the opposite, sitting on the outside. So 3 on the inside, 1 on the outside. Once you get there, it's time to tighten everybody up. And that's the end of those pesky bearings. So we've got 4 at the top here, 4 at the bottom, 4 on the inside, 3 on the inside on this side, and the top left one here on the outside. With that done, it's time to move on to the next step. So taking your nice little Derlin threaded end stoppy device of doom and your nice Y-top back, we're going to connect these 2 pieces together. So if you've got still holding this with the angled corner to the bottom, find this guy sits right on top like that. And he can only go on one way, so it's not hard to figure out. And once he goes in, you'll start to see why you had to put this zip tie backwards so it fits. And then you'll need to find your last 3 M16 bolts that you prepared to secure this piece in place. It's starting to get a little tricky, so if you end up with a nut stuck inside, you might have to use a small Allen key to push it back out to a usable position. Now if you've managed to get a bit of oil on this wood, you won't get the nice crackling sound as the bolts tighten up. But you should know how tight bolts need to be anyway by now. You've done quite a few of them. Oh, this guy is tricky. Oh, there we go. First nut failure. Oh, there we go, got him, finger on either side, bolt in, let's wind this up. What do you reckon, Bob, are we doing well? Or are you just going to sleep in the corner? Job done. That is marvellous, but it's missing something. It's missing something quite important. It's missing our stepper motor. So the only direction that matters on this stepper motor is the direction these cables come out. So if we turn this over facing down, so we can see the letter Y at the back and the Derlin threads up the top, we need to get this end stop out the way and put this stepper motor in so that the wire comes out to the left towards the big block. Now you might have trouble with your zip ties if they're not cut really, really short. Make sure none of them get trapped underneath your stepper motor. If they are getting trapped, you'll have to go back and cut them even closer maybe even using your Stanley knife. So I'm going to have to use a Stanley knife to cut the very tips off these. 1, 2, 3. Luckily zip ties are soft. With that done, we can put him back. Remember to line it all up to the left. And now, much healthier, I can actually line these bolt holes up, and using M3x10s, we can easily put this together. Now, it's always a good idea to start these by hand. That way, if you do get the threads crossed, you're not going to damage anything. It just simply won't go in, so you can pull the bolt out and try again. Once they're started, feel free to do them all up by using the Allen key. And that's looking pretty marvelous. So this is going to drive our belt forward and backwards when we put it on. And these are going to be the axes that this motor slides on. So you can see here that it's got a slide for this direction and these two for that direction. So I flip this guy over, have a look at the back, and just to stop these wires going crazy, we're going to grab one zip tie, put it around all of the wires, and carefully join these end stop wires to the stepper motor wires. So instead of 2 bundles of cables to manage, they'll form just one. Be careful not to cut the wires when you cut this zip tie. And just twist it around out of the way. And look at that. That is marvelous.